this is going to be my very first blog. I did a little introduction in my last video explaining why on earth I'm speaking to my camera now instead of writing blogs. But I do find being a modern time poor woman, I'm really great at writing for other people, but not for myself. So to dive into it with this one, and it might be a little bit of a raw topic for some people at the moment, but it is on divorce day. So there are some people that say that January 3rd, some people say January 6th is the most common day for people announcing that they want a divorce. Regardless of the day specifically, it is kind of that first few weeks in January where life kind of goes back to normal, people start reassessing the new year, and they kind of have this moment where they crack and go, actually, I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And I felt like it was probably something really useful to talk about because it can be a really hard time for people. Now, to start off with, my first bit of advice is to actually stop and be aware of what's going on for you, what's possibly going on for you. And when this day has come around, year and year, or years as the years go by, I've stopped and wondered, why is it that early January is the most common time for people to get divorced? What I think personally that happens is that people are really busy through the year. They might have existing issues in their relationship that have not been addressed for a very long time. Life is busy. You're sweeping it underneath the rug. You might have children. You might have a mortgage. You might both be working. You've got family. You've got friends. You've got dramas. Life just feels like it can be pulling you in so many different directions. As you start to get to October, people start to try and hold things together. November as well, we're making Christmas plans, we're maybe planning holidays, maybe we're saying to each other, hey, we need to take some time to reconnect. But we hit November and December and life gets even busier. The financial strain, I think it's even worse because we might be traveling, we're buying presents, we're buying gifts for everybody, and potentially that's just the icing on top of the cake that makes us go, oh my God, I feel so overwhelmed. Then you hit the Christmas period, and maybe if you do have children, they are home from school, you don't really get time to reconnect, you're running around Christmas parties, you potentially might be having a few arguments over whose family that you're going to and when you spend time with whom. And then you get to this point, you're trying to keep it together where January hits and you start to reassess your life for the future, for the next year maybe. And you start to realize that things have been really difficult and you've been keeping it together. And for a lot of people, they get to this point where they just go, I just can't do it anymore. I'm exhausted, I'm unhappy, and hence we get these common periods called divorce day. So I think the most important thing is to be aware that this is the recipe that can happen. Some people look at me when I go, well, life can get in the way of a relationship, and think that that sounds really silly. But I think these days, especially when we look at what we've all just been through with 2020, we shouldn't underestimate how stressful life can be and the role that it can have on our relationships, and in particular our marriages. So the first thing is to actually stop and be aware of how you've gotten to this point, of what's been going on, and that how it can be really common and natural that you feel this way. Doesn't necessarily mean that your relationship is over, but you do need to stop and take a moment to realize what's been happening and where you are. But also as well that it's okay. I think when we struggle in relationships, there's just so much guilt that comes along of, oh, I've failed at this, or I can't keep this going, or I can't keep this together, or is it my fault, or have I done something, or should I be working harder? You need to actually give yourself a break, because the biggest thing that you're going to need at this time is your brain to be able to think and process things. Now, try not to just explode and say to the other person, I've had enough, I can't deal with this anymore, and walk out in a big dramatic fashion. What I think is really important is that you communicate and you let the person know that you're really struggling. For a lot of people, they tend to bury things down inside. Maybe they've made a lot of comments about being unhappy or going to couples therapy or wanting to fix things, but the other person isn't really aware of how bad things are for them. If that person announces, this is it for me, I need to leave, often what's happened is there's been some form of processing everything. Now, women are really good at this. A family lawyer once said to me that when women in heterosexual relationships leave a man, they have gone through a bit of a mourning process. They have digested everything, they've worked out how it's all going to happen, how the divorce will happen, you know, when you have the kids, if you have the kids, how you'll split up the finances, and then they kind of announce it and just want to keep going, and they leave the other person sitting there at the very beginning of this process trying to digest all these emotions and facts that are being delivered at them. That's kind of the scenario, if you can help it, that you should avoid. So it's really important, if you are struggling, to say to this other person, I'm really struggling and I need to let you know that. So it's also really important to ask for help. Now, that might be in the form of therapy. I am such an advocate for couples therapy. I think that we don't do it enough, and we tend to only go to a therapist when shit's really hitting the fan. And for a lot of people it helps, and for a lot of other people it's at that point of no return, and really the therapist is helping people end the relationship or pull out from one person that that's actually what they want to do. So help may be in the form of therapy, but it might be asking a friend for support, asking a family member, you know, trying to, within your relationship, work out things that may help, you know, bind you back together, reconnect you, whether it is things or habits that need to change at home. Maybe it's a weekend away to go away from the busy life and everything that's pulling you in different directions, and just actually talk about your relationship. Also too, planning on what you both want. For a lot of people, they do grow apart, and one person wants to be in that way and one person wants to be in that direction. So it's really important that you sit down and have these conversations about how you both want your future to be. You might realize that you're not on the same page anymore, which can give some clarity as to why there might be resentment or disconnect in the relationship. It's also important to work out your motivation to work on the relationship. For a lot of people, they get to this point where they just feel like they don't have anything left in the tank to give, that they don't have the energy to stay and fight. They just don't have that motivation to really work at things. I think it's important to be honest with yourself before you start this process as to where that level of motivation is. Are you determined to work this relationship out? Are you determined to put all you can put in for a certain period of time? Or do you just feel so drained and emotionally down that you're not sure if you've got the energy to keep going forward? It's also important to remind yourself that the grass is not necessarily greener on the other side. There isn't this fantasy life that when you separate, you can go and do whatever you want and be with this mystical creature that you have constructed in your head that looks like a really good ideal, but doesn't always work out like that in person. I find that this is something really common that people do these days, and we have these expectations that life should look a certain way and our partner should be a certain way. And I do find a lot of people get to this point where they kind of explode. They leave their partner and they go out into the world thinking they're going to find something that doesn't exist. Now, it doesn't mean that you stay in, you know, a toxic relationship because of not being unsure of what else is out there, but don't think that the solution to all your problems is simply going out there and finding someone else. Now, my last point is there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. I can't tell you that there's this formula that if you follow, you're going to necessarily stay together or you're going to consciously uncouple and have a happy divorce. But what we need to understand, especially when we're looking at other people's relationships as well, is that everyone has their own journey and everyone has a set of behaviors and actions that are right for them. Sometimes I don't even like using the word right and wrong because it feels like there never truly can be a right and wrong when you're ending a relationship. Someone's always going to get hurt. There's always going to be hard times. There's going to be difficulties. There's going to be highs and lows. And in a way, people put a lot of expectations and pressure on you just to get it right and, you know, carry on like a decent human being at a time that is probably the most emotionally challenging and difficult for you. So it's really important that we understand that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach, and we shouldn't look and judge other people for what they're also doing. You know, if you have exploded and you haven't had the conversation with a friend and you haven't sought help and you haven't had a level of motivation or haven't addressed what your level of motivation is, that's still okay. All of this is just some advice that may help, but it also may not help. And I need to stress that everybody is unique and different, and however this works for you and however this plays out for you, if this is you in this situation right now, then whatever it is, that's okay, because that's your way. And for other people looking on to people that might be struggling, we also need to respect other people's choices while still being there and supporting them through whatever they're going through. So I hope that helps my first official blog. I know it was a bit of a heavy one, but it's kind of good timing because this is the time of year that we do see a huge peak in divorces. So whether you are struggling in your relationship or you have friends that are going through this, I think it's really important to say this stuff and put this content out there. So I wish you all the best. Happy New Year again. Now, if you would like to be notified of when I put up new blogs, make sure that you do subscribe to my YouTube channel, Dr. Nikki Goldstein. Link should be somewhere on here if I kind of edit it and put it in. Bye.